Hi, I'm Rachel from the Black Lagoon, and I collect all things creature from the Black Lagoon. Welcome back to my YouTube channel, or as I like to call it, the Creature Corner. This week in the Creature Corner, we're doing a deep dive into the men behind the Gill-man mask. With the upcoming 70th anniversary of Revenge of the Creature here in just a couple weeks, I thought it was time we should talk about all the different actors and stuntmen that wore the iconic Gill-man mask and suit, since they were not always the same in every movie. You would not believe how many interviews and articles I read in preparation for this video. There was just so much information out there, but I am so happy to now put all of that information all together into one video for all of you. This video will include, of course, all three creature films, the Colgate Comedy Hour, Uncle Gilbert on the Munsters, 1987's The Monster Squad, and so much more. Plus, stick around until the end if you want to hear what I think was the biggest missed opportunity for a Gill-man cameo. But first, of course, in case you are new here, a little quick background about me. I have been collecting all things creature from the Black Lagoon for just over 10 years now, and here in the Creature Corner, I talk about my collectibles, take you on creature-related adventures, talk about the history of the movies, and more, including sharing with you any creature-related history that might have happened that week, and occasionally doing a deep dive into those histories. I post new videos here in the Creature Corner now every Thursday, so don't forget to hit that subscribe button if you are a fan of the Gill-man or Universal Monsters. Now, this week in creature history, on March 4th, 1916, William Allen, the producer of all three creature films, was born in Del Mar, Delaware. On March 5th, in 1954, Creature from the Black Lagoon was officially released to audiences across the U.S. in both a 3D and 2D format. And on March 5th, 1996, Whit Bissell, who played Dr. Edwin Thompson in Creature from the Black Lagoon, passed away at the age of 86. May he rest in peace. Now, for this week's video, the actors behind the Gill-man mask. In total, over the years, there have been 6 men who have donned the Gill-man mask, as well as 1 fishman, 2 swamp things, and a handful of other people who have both portrayed or done voiceover for other creature-esque-like characters as well. During this video, we will be going over how these actors and stuntmen came to be the one to wear the Gill-man mask, as well as what it was like on set for them as the Gill-man, and what they went on to do after a little bit as well. I will more than likely be doing a more thorough deep dive on these incredible actors and stuntmen at a later time, because their lives and full careers are just too amazing to not talk about at length, and it would just be way too much information to put all of that into one video today. So for the sake of the video today, we will just be talking about them in relation to the creature. Now let's get into it. We'll start back where it all first began with the very first film in 1954, Creature from the Black Lagoon. In the original movie, there were 2 men who portrayed the Gill-man. For all land scenes, promotional photos, and creature-related events, we had Ben Chapman. And for all underwater scenes, we had Rico Browning. So, how did Ben Chapman come to be the creature from the Black Lagoon? Well, I think I should start all the way back with the fact that Ben Chapman was actually raised as a child in Tahiti. He and his family would relocate to the US in 1940, where Ben would go to high school in the Bay Area of San Francisco. After high school, Ben moved down to Santa Monica, California, where he began working in nightclubs as a Tahitian singer and dancer, which led to his first job in the movie industry, which was in MGM's movie Pagan Love Song that was released in 1950. It is said that he did a few other small parts in other productions as well at this time, before he went to serve in the Korean War from 1950 to 1952. Once Ben was discharged from service, he would return home to Southern California and went right back to entertaining in nightclubs and Tahitian dancing once more. One night, while working at the nightclub The Islander Group in Hollywood, his dancing partner Tawny Marsh would come in to say they were going to make a musical short for the 1952 Miss Universe pageant. He had said that they wanted to do a Polynesian theme, and that some people from Universal Pictures would be in to see Ben's show that night. And Ben's dance group was signed to do the Miss Universe pageant after that night. Now, how this next part played out exactly does vary in each interview that Ben gave, but essentially, when it came time to perform this Polynesian dance with that dance troupe, Ben had said in an interview that the director had come up to him because he was 6'5" and asked him if he would mind playing the part of the chief. And according to Ben, what had happened next was that someone had shown his performance to an executive at Universal, and the executive had asked, "Who is that young guy playing the chief?" And the person had responded, "That's Ben Chapman. His cousin used to be one of our stars." You see, Ben had had a cousin who was a star in the 1940s named John Hall. John had starred in the 1937 film Hurricane, as well as the TV series Ramar the Jungle. Ben went on to say that he believed that they were thinking about bringing back the South Sea pictures that John Hall had starred in, and would have Ben be another John Hall, and so they put him under contract. Ben was signed to a 1-year contract with Universal. Those 1-year contracts were very common in those days for movie studios to do with their actors. It was almost like a testing period. Ben had been quoted as saying it was about being at the right place at the right time for him. I am paraphrasing this next part a little bit, but essentially, after Ben was signed a contract with Universal, he would go down to the casting office on the studio almost every day just to say hi to everybody. There in the casting office worked a woman named Johnny Rennick, who was a casting director for stuntmen and cowboys. She asked Ben one day if anyone had approached him yet about an upcoming film they were working on about a creature from the Amazon. He wasn't familiar with this project at that time, so Johnny had him take a walk with her over to the studio lot where she was going to talk to some people. After this, she told Ben she was going to make some appointments. Ben would go to that initial appointment, and it ended up being with Jack Arnold, the director for Creature from the Black Lagoon, as well as a few other unnamed Universal executives. Johnny Rennick did go with Ben to this initial meeting, during which the executives just gave him the once-over, and that was really it. Johnny then said, "Let's go, Benny," a name that Ben Chapman was often called at Universal. The following day, he was asked to return, and when he did, he was given a contract to sign for $300 a week. He had gotten the part of the Gill-man. Ben had also said in many interviews over the years that he was an experienced swimmer himself as well, and thought that that might have contributed to him being picked for the Gill-man, despite not being used for those underwater scenes. Chapman was also quite tall at 6'5", which probably did have a hand in why he was ultimately picked to be the land Gill-man. So, what was life like on set behind the Gill-man mask for Ben Chapman? Ben Chapman, out of anyone who played the Gill-man, probably gave us the most insight into what life was like on set as the Gill-man, as well as to what the original Gill-man costume actually looked like in person. He had said he thought that the costume was very comfortable because it was all made out of foam rubber, and it had been perfectly sculpted to fit his body. He did mention that whenever they would work inside on the soundstage, that it would get very hot on those sound stages, and because he was enclosed in that foam rubber suit, that he would get extra hot and he would have someone actually hose him down inside the suit. But for those days when they were filming on the lake, he would just stay in the water all day until he was needed. Ben was also well known for scaring passerbys on those filming days at the lake when he was in that full creature costume. This was in fact so well known that Rock Hudson would purposefully bring people by for Ben to scare in that full creature costume. This did eventually get back to a Universal executive who did ask Ben to stop out of fear that he might actually give somebody a heart attack. Ben also went on to talk about how the mask and suit worked with practical effects behind the scenes. Now, I do have to read off this next part because it is a little complicated, but what they would do is on the back of the costume behind the gills, they had rubber bladers with hoses that ran down the back of the costume and off camera. And when he would open his mouth, a man off camera would fill those bladers with air and make the gills move. Now, this next part I found really interesting because I had never heard this before. But when Ben was asked about visibility out of the Gill-man mask, he had said there were 3 sets of eyes for the Gill-man mask, and they were able to be popped out of the Gill-man mask. One set of eyes had holes drilled where the iris was, one set of eyes had holes as big as the pupils, and one didn't have any holes at all in the eyes. He continued to say, for long shots he could wear the eyes with the larger holes so that he could see. With closer shots he would have to use the eyes with the smaller holes, and with very close shots he would have to wear the eyes without any holes at all. For those shots when he would wear the eyes where he couldn't see at all, there would be someone there with a flashlight, and he would follow the light as he moved. He also said that he would rehearse his movements for a scene and would try to duplicate his steps exactly. I think some of that dance background definitely helped him with that. Much like the suit, Ben had said each mask was actually sculpted separately so that it would perfectly fit each actor's head and face mold. Ben also said that the original Gill-man costume was a mossy green color, and it was highlighted with gold copper paint to give it that fish-like appearance. And for the lips, they were more like regular lips, he said, but a little bit of a darker red. So by Ben's description, I think Trick or Treat Studios nailed this mask. He is a mossy green color, is highlighted with gold copper paint, and has that darker red lip. So what did Ben go on to do after Creature from the Black Lagoon? Well, he would actually go on to return as the Gill-man once more, but we'll get back to that in just a bit. But after the creature altogether, in the 1960s, it was said that Ben went to work for the 7-Up bottling company in Los Angeles for several years. He also had a career in Hawaiian tourism, and for many years worked as an executive in real estate investment until his retirement. In the 1990s, though, Ben would come out of retirement to start doing autograph shows and conventions after someone reached out to him about doing one in Los Angeles. Anyone I've ever spoken to who had the chance to meet Ben at one of these many conventions that he did has never had anything but such nice things to say about Ben, and he always seemed to really enjoy meeting all of the creature fans. He, in fact, even began referring to his fans at these conventions as Gillies. Ben was also known for giving out Gill-man $100 bills called Gilly Bucks at these conventions, as well as with any autograph purchases from his website. I am very fortunate to have one of these Gilly Bucks that was gifted to me by a friend who did get the chance to meet Ben at one of these conventions. Ben Chapman really was so very proud of the work that he did as the Gill-man on Creature from the Black Lagoon, and it really did show in all of the interviews and convention work that he went on to do later in life. Ben would sadly pass away, though, on February 21st, 2008 at the age of 79. Now, for our underwater Gill-man, Rico Browning. I think it's important to note at this point that Ben Chapman actually shot all of his scenes in California while Rico Browning shot all of his underwater scenes in Florida, and the two would never meet during filming. In fact, they wouldn't meet until many, many years later. So, how did Rico Browning become the man behind the Gill-man mask for those underwater sequences? Well, to start, Rico was a Floridian born and raised. He began working in Wakulla Springs in the 1940s, when he learned to perform in underwater newsreels dreamed up by Newton Perry, who was a well-respected American swimmer, attraction promoter, and swimming coach. It was while working in Wakulla Springs in 1953 that Browning was asked to show around a film crew who was out scouting shooting locations. Browning had said in an interview that he'd had a friend who had called him and said, "I've got some people coming up from California to Wakulla Springs. I'm going to be out of town. Could you pick them up at the airport and take them to the springs and show them around?" Rico said sure, and so he did. According to Browning, their cameraman had asked him if he could swim around in front of the camera so that they could get a perspective of size of a human being against the fish in the grass, and so he did. That cameraman actually ended up being Scotty Welburn, who went on to do special photography for Creature from the Black Lagoon. A couple weeks after that day, Rico Browning got a call from the general manager of the hotel that crew had been staying at when they were visiting. The hotel manager had told him the people who had been staying here are looking for you, so I'm going to give them your phone number. So he gave them Rico's phone number, and about a week later, Rico got a call from director Jack Arnold. Arnold said, "We're doing an underwater movie about a monster. How would you like to be that monster?" Rico simply answered, "Sure." And just like that, our underwater Gill-man had been found. So, what was life like on set behind the Gill-man mask for Rico Browning? From all accounts, it sounds like Rico was a natural from the start, and he swam with ease as the Gill-man. Rico had the incredible ability to hold his breath for up to 4 minutes, and he could shoot scenes in that time. What I think is also remarkable is that Rico would not come up in between takes, and would instead just have a breathing tube down there for him to be able to breathe. He had said in an interview that the lips of the suit actually only sat about a half inch from his own lips, and he would just put the air hose in his mouth to breathe. He would hold his breath and then go do a scene, and he would have other safety people nearby with other air hoses in case something were to go wrong. He had joked that they had a signal that if he went totally limp, that meant he needed air. He did say in all seriousness, though, that it did work out well and that they never had any problems while shooting the underwater scenes. Rico was also quoted as saying about the costume, that it's like when you play football and you put on all that gear. The shoes, the pads, the helmet. At first it's bulky and cumbersome, but then you go into the game and you start to play. You don't even know you have it on. Swimming in the suit was like that. Once you get in it, you forget you have it on. I think we all kind of forget that there is a man behind the creature suit when watching Creature from the Black Lagoon, especially those underwater scenes. Rico swam with such grace while wearing that suit that it really did feel like the Gill-man was a living, breathing creature. Rico would go on to reprise his role as the underwater Gill-man in both sequels, Revenge of the Creature in 1955 and Creature Walks Among Us in 1956. He is the only person to have appeared in all 3 films. When asked how he came to be the Gill-man in the following 2 movies, Rico had said in an interview, "The second Creature movie, Revenge of the Creature, I got a call from the director Jack Arnold. He said, 'Rico, we're making another movie about the creature. We need you.' Rico responded, 'Okay, do you want me to come to California to have a costume made?' Arnold responded, 'No, we're shooting.' Rico then asked, 'What do you mean you're shooting?' To which Arnold said, 'We're in St. Augustine at Marine Studios and we're shooting the movie.' Arnold continued to say that we hired someone to play the creature and he can't swim. According to Browning, it turned out to be a man named John Lamb, who he knew well. He was an underwater cameraman, but he wasn't a stuntman. So Rico said, 'Well, I don't have a suit.' Arnold said, 'We'll cut one down to fit you.' And so Rico said okay. Rico said that he then went down to Marine Studios in St. Augustine, Florida, and that in about 3 days they had cut the suit down to fit him. and so he was able to play in the second movie, Revenge of the Creature. He went on to say that for the third movie, they didn't even question him, he just did it. So what did Rico Browning go on to do after portraying the Gill-man 3 times? Well, he did go back to work as a swimmer, this time in Silver Springs in Florida. It was while working there that he got the idea for a TV series, Flipper. He and a man named Jack Cowden would go on to write a book about a boy and a Florida dolphin. The book was never published, but Ivan Torres, who Rico had previously worked with, did take the book and turn it into a film. The movie ended up being so successful that they ended up launching the Flipper TV series, which also became very popular. Browning then went on to become the president of the Ivan Torres studio in Miami after that. And in 1968, he was elected to head up the newly created Florida Motion Picture and Television Producers Association. He continued to direct underwater scenes for multiple movies as well over the years. Much like Ben Chapman, after retirement, Rico Browning would also start to do autograph shows and conventions, meeting creature fans across the U.S. I am so grateful that I did get the chance to meet Rico Browning at a convention, and that I did get him to sign all 3 of my creature posters, as well as an 8x10 of my favorite creature scene, the underwater dance scene between Rico Browning and Ginger Stanley. Now, like I mentioned before, Ben Chapman would go on to reprise his role as the Gill-man, but only one other time. And that was for the Colgate Comedy Hour that aired on February 21st in 1954. Ben actually did an interview where he talked exclusively about the making of the Colgate Comedy Hour. It was in this interview that he said that he was surprised that he was asked to come back to play the Gill-man, because they had already wrapped the movie. They called him up and asked him to report to NBC for the Colgate Comedy Hour, and they had said that he was going to do a skit with Abbott and Costello. He had said that he was extra surprised by this because on set the Gill-man costume was such a hush-hush thing. No one was allowed to see the creature or what he looked like. When he went to the set, he saw that Glenn Strange was also there to play Frankenstein's monster. Ben went on to say that he and Glenn each had their own rooms, and they did get to meet Abbott and Costello briefly before the show, but that they didn't really get to sit down and talk with them. This was just a one-day shoot, there was no rehearsal, and it was all shot live. They both got into their respective costumes, and Ben actually did say that he thought Glenn's costume was harder to get into because of all the makeup, and his was just a suit. He did go on to say that, mind you, it did take him a couple hours to get into the suit, and once he did, it would get very hot very quickly. Ben went on to say that he wished he had gotten the chance to better know Abbott and Costello, and that he wishes that there had been a proper Abbott and Costello Meet the Creature from the Black Lagoon movie. He had said they met everyone else, but they never really got to meet the Gill-man. It is a shame that they never got to do a full-length Abbott and Costello Meet the Creature movie. It is something that I think we all wish would have happened, but unfortunately, it wasn't in the cards. If you are interested in seeing the Colgate Comedy Hour that featured Glenn Strange as Frankenstein's monster, Ben Chapman as the Gill-man, and Abbott and Costello, there are DVDs of it floating around just about everywhere these days, it seems. I was able to get mine off of eBay, and it was for a very fair price, and I know that there are still quite a lot left on eBay as well, so you can get your copy there. I don't know if it's streaming anywhere at this time, and if I do find it on YouTube, I will share it. And for good measure, I'll add it to my Amazon if it's on there as well. Ben would not be asked to reprise his role as the Gill-man again after this, and he would not be in either of the following sequels, because his contract had ended with Universal International, and he was not picked back up as an option with Universal by the time Revenge of the Creature was in production. Without a land Gill-man for Revenge of the Creature, Universal would get Tom Hennessy to take on this role in the 1955 sequel. Now, bear with me a little bit on this one because unfortunately there just was not a lot about Tom Hennessy's life or career online. Despite my best research efforts, I wasn't able to find a whole lot. However, I was able to find an interview that he did for a book that I have since ordered. Unfortunately, it did not arrive in time for me making this video, but once it does, and I do a deeper dive on Tom Hennessy, I will go over that interview from that book at that time. But for now, what I could find. So, how did Tom Hennessy come to be the Gill-man in Revenge of the Creature? Well, Hennessy was a stunt double for many actors in the 1950s, including Rock Hudson, Jeff Chandler, and so many more. It was also reported that Hennessy worked as an elementary school teacher on many Hollywood studios, and he actually had many celebrity students, including Natalie Wood, Annette Funicello, and Sal Mineo. It is unclear to me at this time exactly what led Tom Hennessy to being asked to be the Gill-man in Revenge of the Creature, but I imagine because of all of his work as a stunt double, his name had to have been well known around the studios at this time, including Universal International. And someone at the studio must have asked him if he would be interested in the part. And much like Ben, he must have been at the right place at the right time. Now, as for what life was like on set behind the Gill-man mask for Tom Hennessy, it is said that Tom did not enjoy his time on set as the Gill-man, and he had a very hard time seeing out of the Gill-man mask, despite the eye holes actually being made bigger for this sequel mask than it was in the original. It does also sound like he did often express his sentiments that he would never return as the Gill-man. As unfortunate as it is that Tom did not seem to enjoy his time in the Gill-man mask and suit, Tom did allegedly make these roaring and growling sounds throughout the filming of Revenge of the Creature while playing the Gill-man. And according to some, the producers liked the sounds so much that they did actually decide to leave them in the film. Instead of using the animal sound effects that they had used in the first film. It is also believed that his noises were even dubbed in Creature Walks Among Us as well. During his time on Revenge of the Creature, he was also an uncredited marine land diver in the film. So what did Tom Hennessy go on to do after the Gill-man? Well, he would go on to continue acting in multiple movies and TV shows throughout the 50s and 60s into the early 1970s. It is said that after this he did go on to become a full-time teacher, and then he ran his family's oil company until its sale in 1991. Tom Hennessy did pass away on May 23rd in 2011 at the age of 87. It is not confirmed exactly why Tom Hennessy did not return for the third and final installment of The Creature in Creature Walks Among Us, but my best guess would be that whatever the reason, it must have been at least in part because of his happiness, or lack thereof, on set during his time playing the creature in Revenge of the Creature. So, without a land Gill-man, Universal International would go on to get Don McGowan to portray the land Gill-man in this third and final installment in Creature Walks Among Us. Unfortunately, much like Tom Hennessy, there isn't a whole lot about Don McGowan that is specific to his time during the production of Creature Walks Among Us. Unfortunately, Don did pass away quite young and never gave an interview that was about his time as the Gill-man. So while some of this is fact to the best of my knowledge, some of this will also be left up to speculation as well. So, how did Don McGowan come to be the creature in the final installment? It was said that his mother was actually a negative cutter for Pathé, a French film production and distribution company, which does seem to be what led him to have a career in the movie industry. McGowan began acting and landed his first role in 1951. He was in many movies and TV series from the very start of his career. So, much like Tom Hennessy, I am sure because of this, his name was already quite familiar to Universal International casting directors, which more than likely could have led to his involvement in Creature Walks Among Us. Don McGowan was also quite tall at 6'7", so I'm sure, at least in part, much like his predecessors, that did help at least a little bit to get cast as the land Gill-man in Creature Walks Among Us. As for what life was like on set for Don McGowan, unfortunately there is no way for me to even speculate how Don McGowan's time as the Gill-man went on set because, unfortunately, Creature Walks Among Us is the third and final installment of the Creature trilogy, so if he'd had a good time as the Gill-man and would have returned to play him once more, we'll never know for sure. I imagine he must have at least had an easier time than his predecessors playing the Gill-man, since the mask for the Gill-man did change quite drastically for Creature Walks Among Us. Quick spoiler alert, just in case you haven't yet seen this Creature movie out of the Creature trilogy. In the beginning of the film, the Gill-man is badly burned in a fire, leading them to do a surgical transformation. This surgery then leads them to give the Gill-man a much different mask and appearance in the film. And the eye holes were made much larger for this Gill-man mask. In fact, you can actually see most of Don McGowan's eyes through the mask in this film. So it must have been much easier to navigate the set in that Gill-man mask. Also, during that same part of the film when they are bandaging the Gill-man, the doctors notice that he is shedding his gills and breathing using a kind of lung system. Because the creature now has more human-like skin, he is given clothing for the rest of the movie. Because the Gill-man does wear clothes for most of this film, I've always wondered if Don McGowan was wearing a full creature suit underneath those clothes for the entirety of the film. In my research, I wasn't able to find anything that supported whether or not he did though. If he didn't, I imagine it must have been a little easier to play the part of the Gill-man. However, on the other hand, if he did have to wear a full suit underneath those clothes, I imagine it must have gotten pretty hot and unbearable on set a lot for him. It is unfortunate that some of these questions might never get answered today, but as always, I will continue my research on all of this and I will always update you should I find anything new. But for now, since there was not another Creature film to be made, what did Don McGowan go on to do after The Creature Walks Among Us? Well, he did continue on in his acting career. He ended up being in Mel Brooks' Blazing Saddles as well as Tarzan and the Valley of Gold. He also went on to guest star in many TV series over the years, including everything from Gunsmoke to Get Smart. After acting, he did go on to manage some apartment buildings in the North Hollywood area. and later becoming a restaurateur, owning and operating Johnny's Bar and Grill on Lankershim Boulevard in North Hollywood. And after that closed, he actually opened his own place, McGowan's Clubhouse. And apparently they specialized in lasagna and hamburgers. An interesting combination. Again, this was also in North Hollywood, and he would own this restaurant until 1981 when he would unfortunately pass away at just the age of 59. After Creature Walks Among Us premiered in 1956, it would be many, many years before we would see another person behind the Gill-man mask. But then, just shy of 10 years after that final film, in 1965, Uncle Gilbert came to visit his cousins the Munsters on the episode Love Comes to Mockingbird Heights. This portrayal of the Gill-man was played by Richard Hale. At this time, Richard Hale was already an established actor, both on stage and a character actor in film. He was also an opera singer. At this time, he was best known for the 1953 film Julius Caesar, in which he played the soothsayer who warns, "Beware the Ides of March." He was also on the Alfred Hitchcock Hour and Alfred Hitchcock Presents prior to his appearance on The Munsters. Both of these shows did air on CBS and NBC. I mention this because I'm sure it did at least lead in part to him being cast as Uncle Gilbert on The Munsters, because The Munsters was a CBS production as well. As for what life was like behind the Gill-man mask for Richard Hale, unfortunately, I wasn't able to find any interviews or articles where Richard Hale talked exclusively about his time on The Munsters, which is understandable because this wasn't a full film production that would last weeks to months, but rather just a single TV series episode that probably only shot for about a day. In regards to the Gill-man mask, though, that Richard Hale wore for Uncle Gilbert, it appears to me that the mask looks like a recreation of the original Gill-man mask from Creature from the Black Lagoon, rather than from one of the sequels. The only difference being that it does appear like the eyes had been removed fully from the mask. This was most likely done in an effort to allow Richard Hale to navigate the Munsters' home more easily in the Gill-man costume. I also imagine that Richard Hale is not in a full creature suit, since Uncle Gilbert does wear a full outfit for this appearance. It looks to me like they just had Richard Hale wear the mask, hands, and feet part of the Gill-man costume. Now, I want to mention that it is said that the original Gill-man costume was discarded after the original film Creature from the Black Lagoon was done being shot. But we will talk about that in another video at a later time. I mention this though because whatever Uncle Gilbert is wearing in this episode must have been made specifically for this episode, which I do find quite interesting. Now for what Richard Hale went on to do after. He would continue acting in a wide variety of movies and TV series almost up until his passing. He would pass away in 1981 at the age of 88. Uncle Gilbert would of course resurface many years later in Rob Zombie's The Munsters movie that came out in 2022. In this adaptation, Uncle Gilbert would be played by Renata Kiss. I must admit, I did actually almost forget that Uncle Gilbert was included in this remake/reboot, and so I guess that does make 7 people who don the Gill-man mask in total. Renata Kiss was an assistant hairstylist and an assistant makeup artist on the set of this production, so I am sure that is what led them to being behind the Uncle Gilbert mask for this film. After the original Uncle Gilbert appearance on the Munsters TV series, it would be quite a while before we would see another portrayal of our beloved Gill-man on film or TV. But then, in 1987, a horror comedy by the name of The Monster Squad would bring back to life our beloved Gill-man, albeit in a little more of a toothy and muscular fashion, but still a Gill-man. This Gill-man would be played by Tom Woodruff Jr. So, how did Tom come to be the new Gill-man for the Monster Squad? Well, it all started back when Tom first moved to the LA area. He was working in a camera store and using all of his free time to visit movie studios because he was seeking a job as a special effects makeup artist. After doing this for 6 months, he managed to become a makeup artist in the 1983 film Metal Storm. He would go on to work with special effects crews for many different movies, including The Thing and Aliens, in which he would make his debut on screen playing a salvager. This actually led Woodruff to playing the creatures for many movies he did effects for, and ultimately included the Gill-man in the Monster Squad. So, what was life like as the Gill-man for Tom Woodruff Jr.? Tom was not only the man who played the Gill-man in the Monster Squad, but he was also the special effects makeup artist responsible for all 4 monsters in this film, including, of course, the Gill-man. I do want to clarify, Tom wasn't the only special effects makeup artist working on these monsters. He was one member of a team of artists including Matt Rose and Steve Wang, respectively seen here, airbrushing the Gill-man costume Tom Woodruff was in. And it sounds like he very much enjoyed his time on the set of the Monster Squad. In an interview that Tom did with Under the Radar, he talked about how much he loved the classic Universal monsters and just what this experience meant to him. I have to read off some of the quotes from this interview. He said, "For me, it was the old Universal monster movies that I would find on TV that made me think that's what I want to do for a living." He went on to say about his time on set that it was great and it was this wonderful Shane Black script and Fred Dekker directing, and being able to do all of those monsters I grew up with was a real blast. And when the interviewer asked him if he had a favorite monster and who it was, he said, "I do, the creature from the Black Lagoon." He went on to say he always thought it was the coolest monster, the coolest man in the suit, and that it was, he thought, way ahead of its time. He said he thinks there are aspects of it today that are still very effective and very successful today. And I couldn't agree more. I love hearing when someone is passionate about one of the classic monsters, especially the creature, of course, and gets to work with them in some capacity. I just imagine it has to be such an extra special feeling, and it just makes me so happy for them. Now, after filming was wrapped on the Monster Squad, in 1988, Tom and fellow Stan Winston Studios effects supervisor Alec Gillis left the company and founded effects studio Amalgamated Dynamics. To date, their company has worked on 150 film and television projects, including Death Becomes Her, Alien 3, and the remake of it in 2017. I do also have to mention this, since I did grow up with this movie, Tom Woodruff Jr. was also the man behind the mask, as well as part of the team who designed Pumpkinhead. He is still active today and still does practical effects in movies. I was not as familiar with Tom Woodruff Jr. before doing research for this video, but I have since become quite a fan of his work. I can't wait to see what he continues to do. Now, aside from our traditional Gill-man characters, there have also been some Gill-man adjacent characters over the years that have graced both the silver screen and the TV screen, who I want to give mention to in this video as well. I will be doing deep dive videos on all of these fellow creatures at a later time. They will all be their own individual videos because they all really do deserve to have their own time where I can really talk about in depth about these different creatures, their backgrounds, the history, the characters, the actors, all of it. And again, it would have just been way too much information for one video right now. First, I think it's absolutely necessary that I bring up Swamp Thing. Although he isn't a Gill-man per se and rather a Swamp Thing, the two are just way too close, I couldn't skip it. First, we had Dick Durock, who was our Swamp Thing in the 1982 film, as well as the return of Swamp Thing in 1989, and he was also the Swamp Thing in the TV series that ran from 1990 to 1993. Next, we had Len Carlson, who was the voice for Swamp Thing in the animated series that ran from 1990 to 1991. And most recently, we had Derek Mears, who played Swamp Thing in the 2019 TV series reboot. Like I said, I will be doing a video down the line that is dedicated to Swamp Thing, so I won't be getting into the background and the story of the character as well as all of the actors who portrayed the character at this time. But stay tuned for a Swamp Thing video in the future. Now, I do feel it absolutely necessary that I also mention, of course, Doug Jones, who played the Fishman in Guillermo del Toro's The Shape of Water. Again, I know, not a Gill-man per se, but rather a Fishman. But because The Shape of Water would not have come to be without the inspiration from Creature from the Black Lagoon, I had to mention him. For now, I won't be talking about Doug Jones as the Fishman in this video because I will be doing a deep dive video exclusive to The Shape of Water at a later time. And in that video, we will talk all about the Fishman, the special effects, the story, the production of the film, and so much more. We're just about rounding out all of the creature adjacent characters now. Now, this creature is actually much newer. We now have a creature in DC's Creature Commandos. Creature Commandos is currently an animated TV series on HBO Max. There will also be a comic about it this year in July of 2025. This Gill-man is not so much a Gill-man, but rather a fish girl named Nina Mazursky. Nina is voiced by Zoe Chow in this new animated series. I'll have to do a video about this show once I finally watch it and once the comic series comes out too. And lastly, although I know that this won't be for everybody, I did feel it necessary to mention the Monster High dolls. I did spend a lot more time than I had anticipated researching the Monster High character Laguna Blue, but I'd always assumed that she was their character that was based off Creature from the Black Lagoon, much like Draculaura is Dracula and Frankenstein is Frankenstein. I did of course question my theory when they came out with the Creature from the Black Lagoon Monster High doll, but I had to be sure. After much research, it would appear Laguna Blue is actually the offspring of an ocean nymph and a sea monster, and not a river monster like our Gill-man. After discovering Laguna's background, it did lead me to discover another Monster High character named Gillington Weber, who is Laguna's boyfriend. And I saw it said that his characteristics were actually based off of the Creature from the Black Lagoon. The live-action Monster High TV movie Laguna Blue is played by Lena LeCompte. And in the animated Monster High TV series episode from 2011, Laguna Blue is voiced by Laura Bailey. Gillington Weber has appeared in the animated web series on YouTube. He has been voiced by Yuri Lowenthal and Evan Smith. I do have to say, when I started research for this video, I did not think that it would be wrapping up with me researching the Monster High dolls and characters, but here we are. I'm not mad about it, just didn't expect it. Now, after all of those creatures, there is one creature that never came to be, and I don't even think that it was ever even considered. Well, maybe it was considered, but nothing ever came from it at all as far as I could tell. Of course, there have been a lot of remakes and reboots talked about over the years, and it would have been really fantastic to have a true Abbott and Costello meets the creature from the Black Lagoon movie, but I'm not even talking about any of those. What I think is the biggest missed opportunity for a Gill-man appearance has to be that we never got a Creature from the Black Lagoon Hammer horror film, or even a Gill-man-like character in a Hammer horror film. I love Hammer horror films so much. It really is its own genre of horror, and a fantastic one at that. I just can't help myself but to think about how great it could have been had they done a creature film, either with the Gill-man by himself, or with Dracula, or Frankenstein, or with the Mummy, or with all of them together. It just would have been so incredible. Also, just to see the creature with Peter Cushing and Christopher Lee in that traditional Hammer horror setting would have just been it would have been perfect. Of course, though, Hammer Horror did release 158 films in total, and while I have seen quite a few of them, I have not seen them all just yet. So I guess there is a teeny tiny possibility that I am wrong about this. And there could be a Gill-man-like character hiding in one of those films that I haven't seen. But I could not find anything anywhere about any creature or Gill-man-like character existing in any Hammer Horror film anywhere. So I do feel pretty comfortable saying that it never happened. But please do correct me if I'm wrong. I would love to be wrong just this once. I believe it's at the end of Hammer Horror's The Mummy, where there's a lagoon. Don't worry, I won't give away any spoilers in case you haven't seen this one. It is great though, I do recommend it. But something about seeing that did spark this thought in me of what a Gill-man Hammer horror film could have looked like, and I just wish we could have gotten one. Like I said, I do absolutely love Hammer horror films, and I could go on talking about them forever, but I will stop here. But I will give you some Hammer horror homework, if you will. What I think is possibly my favorite film of the franchise is Dracula AD 1972. It's so ridiculous in the best way, and I think that if you haven't seen it yet, you should definitely go watch it. Well, now we've come to that part where you should tell me in the comments, do you have a favorite Gill-man? And if so, who is it? Also, do you think there are any other missed opportunities for a creature cameo or movie? I'll leave you all now with some Gill-man trivia, courtesy of our first ever Gill-man, Ben Chapman. Did you know that Glenn Strange, who played Frankenstein's monster in House of Frankenstein, among other films, was the first actor Universal International ever approached about playing the Gill-man in Creature from the Black Lagoon? According to Chapman, though, once Strange found out that there was water involved in the role, he was not interested at all and was immediately out. It definitely could have been interesting having Glenn Strange as the Gill-man, but I am glad that Ben Chapman was our original land Gill-man. And now I do have to tell you all, as hard as I tried to keep the Creature Corner premiere date on Wednesdays, unfortunately due to my schedule changing, I am going to have to change the premiere date to Thursdays from this week on. I appreciate all of your understanding on this so much, and I'm so sorry that I couldn't keep our Wednesday premiere date. I am so grateful though that I get to continue making these videos even if they do premiere on another day. So thank you all so much for being here, and don't forget, I'll see you back here next Thursday for another episode of the Creature Corner. Goodbye!